Chevron, overturned. So I'm going to talk about chevron deference, which was overturned in a recent Supreme Court case. First off, what is chevron deference? Well, chevron deference is a legal concept that was instated through the Chevron v. Natural Resources Defense Council court case of 1984. Most laws are vague, and chevron deference means that courts should give deference to agencies when interpreting the law. For example, there might be a law that says that the EPA has to keep the air clean by stopping the release of toxic chemicals, but doesn't state which chemicals should be defined as toxic. So, according to chevron deference, the EPA is responsible for defining which chemicals are toxic in this case. Makes sense, right? Well, it was overturned on June 28th of this year. To preface, much of the controversy surrounding chevron deference stems from the U.S. Constitution, where the government was broken into three branches intended to balance each other out. The legislative branch consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and is supposed to create the law. Next, the judicial branch consists of the court system, as meant to interpret the law. And, lastly, the executive branch consists of the president, presidential advisors, and governmental agencies. Its goal is to implement the law. This seems rather straightforward, but the chevron deference case stems from a disagreement on how much power each branch should hold, which is a topic that has been contentious ever since the advent of the U.S. Constitution. Another key element of the chevron situation is the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946. Both the Chevron case and the case that overturned it interpret the Administrative Procedure Act in different ways. So to understand those cases, one has to understand the Administrative Procedure Act. The Administrative Procedure Act establishes how federal administrative agencies make rules. It says that agencies, which are under the executive branch, are supposed to implement laws passed by Congress, which is part of the judicial branch. The key word here is implement, since what the implementation of laws entails is very much not a clear-cut matter when it comes to Chevron. Alright, so now that the background is out of the way, it's time to get to the first stop of our timeline, Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council, otherwise known as the original court ruling that instated chevron deference. The case supported the Republican Party's agenda to diminish environmental regulation at the time. It pertained to the Clean Air Act, and whether the EPA under Reagan could continue to pollute the air, or if the court should regulate their pollution, and resulted in, well, the EPA being allowed to continue to pollute the environment. So, the majority opinion of Chevron resulted in chevron deference, meaning that courts have to give deference to agencies when interpreting laws. Alright, so now that I've explained the original Chevron case, next I'll be talking about Loper v. Raimondo, the case that overturned chevron deference. This case was about herring fishing in ocean waters. Herring fishermen were annoyed that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration suddenly made them pay for the cost of boats after previously subsidizing this cost. So basically, this case was rooted in an agency taking advantage of chevron deference. The main impact of Loper v. Raimondo was that it overturned chevron deference, meaning that courts are no longer permitted to give deference to agencies. Additionally, a side effect of Loper v. Raimondo was that it effectively removed the statute of limitations, which is, well, not really a good thing. Alright, so now for why. What was the argument that overturned chevron deference? Well, funnily enough, just as the Republican Party advocated for chevron deference, 40 years later, the Republican-dominated Supreme Court overturned it. The main reason against chevron deference was that it imbalanced the branches of government. The argument was that Chevron was making agencies, which are part of the executive branch, either make laws, which is the role of the legislative branch, or interpret laws, which is the role of the judicial branch, and that either way that was imbalancing the system and giving the executive branch too much power. This is part of the recent trend of the Republican Party trying to remove power from the executive branch. Additionally, the argument against chevron deference had originalist tendencies. Supreme Court Justice Roberts cited both the Federalist Papers and a case from 1803 when making this argument. Alright, so now for why the overturn of chevron deference might not be such a great thing, also known as a brief summary of Supreme Court Justice Kagan's dissent. The most straightforward reason for why the overruling of chevron deference is a bad thing is specialization. Agencies know more specifics about what they cover than the court does, like the FDA is expected to know more about what food to recall than a random judge. So without chevron deference, the courts could be forced to make decisions about specialized topics that they don't have the knowledge to make. Additionally, The overturn of chevron deference shifts power from the executive to judicial branch. This doesn't seem like the worst thing at first, but it could have a disastrous outcome. Currently, Congress is very inefficient because of how divided the country is, and agencies used to rely on chevron deference to pass laws. Basically, chevron deference was serving as a crutch for agencies to be able to work around the effectively broken system that Congress has turned it into. But now that chevron deference has been overturned, the weight of what these agencies used to do now falls onto the very inefficient Congress, who probably won't be able to keep up with the massive amount of additional work that this forces upon them, which will just make it more efficient than it already is. And if that sounds bad, it's not all. The overturn of chevron deference also goes against stare decisis, a long-held principle of the court that obligates it to follow historical cases on future rulings. This principle is there in order to give law a sense of permanence. If the Supreme Court can just make one decision, then reverse it in a few years, then it's hard for its decisions to hold any weight, and everyone else affected by the decision are left scrambling with these shifts. This is part of a concerning trend of the now conservative-dominated Supreme Court going against stare decisis, as it also went against stare decisis when overturning Roe v. Wade. So that's all I think. Thank you for watching.